in unum Deum, Patrem omnipotentem, Factorem celi et terrae, visibili omnium, et invisibilium.
Et in unum Dominum Iesum Christum, Filium Dei unigenitum,
Et ex Patre natum, ante omnia saecula.
Neum de Deo, lumen de lumine, Neo verum de Neo verum,
Genitum novatum, consubstantialem Patri, per quem omnia facta sunt,
qui propter nos homines, et propter nostram salutem, descendit de celi,
et incarnatus est de Spiritus Sancto, ex Maria Virgine, et homo factus est,
crucifixus etiam pro nobis, sub Pontio Pilato, passus et sepultus
et resurrexit tertia die, secundum Scripturas,
et ascendit in caelum, sedet ad dexteram Patri,
et iterum venturus est cum gloria.
Good evening, dear TV friend, and welcome to Understanding Church History with me, Father Cletus Aka, here in Divine Mercy Radio Television in the Diocese of Boye. It's a wonderful day. It has been a wonderful weekend. It has also been a very, very busy weekend. We are happy to be here. We are here because you are there, and since you are there, we are here. So we are glad to have you there, dear TV friend, and we have an interesting topic for you today. It is always good for us to understand church history because that is where we are coming from. You are to know your history, you'll be able to appreciate where you're coming from, where you're going, and of course, you know that Catholic Church is not just a church formed by man, but it was a church formed by Jesus Christ himself. So today we are going to talk about the origin of Roman Catholic papacy and the election of Pope Leo XIV as the 267th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. Origin of Roman Catholic papacy and the election of Pope Leo XIV as the 267th Pope in the Roman Catholic Church. It should be understood, and it must be understood, that the origins of the Roman Catholic papacy can be traced as far back as the Gospel of Matthew chapter 16 verses 18 to 19. Of course, the beginnings of the papacy from the Greek word papas, meaning father, may be traced to Christ's word to Peter. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will never overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Matthew chapter 16 verses 18 to 19. Those were the words of Jesus to Peter. Deriving from Matthew 16:19 is the doctrine of the power of the keys. That is, Christ's words to Peter assert supreme authority over the church. The phrase binding and loosing, also found in Matthew 18:18, which Christ is talking to the apostles, is taken to refer to the church's authority. The power to bind and loose connotes the authority to absolve sins, to pronounce doctrinal judgments, and to make disciplinary decisions in the church. Of course, Jesus entrusted this authority to the church through the ministry of the apostles, and in particular through the ministry of Peter, the only one to whom he specifically entrusted the keys of the kingdom of heaven and earth. That is why the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 553, states that the Pope is sometimes known as the Vicar of Christ. The word vicar, coming from the Latin word substitute, that is, the Pope is the visible representative of Christ on earth. Part of the papal function lies within the magisterium, that is, the supreme authority of the Roman Catholic Church to interpret scripture and teach it. In the section, the church, which we look forward to, and of course we see very clearly that it's only the Pope who has the supreme authority over the church. Nobody can direct the Pope. That is why if the Pope is resigning, he writes his resignation letter and he approves it himself. Nobody approves it because it's the supreme authority. So today we are going to talk on the topic, the origin of the Roman Catholic papacy and the election of Leo XIV as 267 Pope in the Catholic Church. Of course, with me in the studio is Cliff Hour. Welcome, Cliff.
Thank you very much for that, Cletus Aka. Good evening, dear followers of Church History, Divine Mercy, Radio Television, House of Boya. It's always a pleasure to be here with you, Father Aka, to talk about the history of the church, which it is the faith we are struggling to keep. And of course, I'm sure we're going to discuss the topic, which is something current. And I think the introduction there you've given brings us to the limelight on what we shall be discussing, especially the life of Pope Leo XIV, who is recently elected as the 267th Pope in the Roman Catholic Church. Thank you, Father Cletus. It's a pleasure always.
Thank you. So before we dive into Leo XIV, it is good that we see about the see, the chair of St. Peter, of course, and I would like to just give this briefly before I enter briefly into the life of Leo XIV. That is our main topic for today. Today's feast places the chair of the Cathedral of St. Peter at the center of our attention, or rather, the specific mission which Christ entrusted to Peter. On the feast date back as the 3rd century, the feast originated around around the Cathedral of Peter, the place where the Bishop of Rome resided and governed. The cathedral was a fixed seat of the bishop, placed in the mother church of the diocese, hence the word cathedral, which was the symbol of the bishop's authority, who, as a successor of the apostle, is called to protect the flock and transmit the teaching of the gospel to the Christian community. The institution of today's solemnity, that is the solemnity of the chair of Peter, as a predecessor as a successor of the apostle, or the main successor of the apostle, in fact, as the head of the college of the apostle, is rooted in the scriptures. It should be noted that when we talk about collegiality, we talk about the Bishop of Rome, who is the Holy Father, of course, and the College of Bishops. They sit in a meeting, and the bishops advise the Holy Father on how to carry out the evangelical work that has been trusted to him. And it should be noted, Mr. Cliff, that it is the right of the Bishop of Rome to evangelize the whole world. But since he cannot do that, he extends that ministry to his brothers bishops. And since the bishop himself cannot run the diocese, he extends to priest. So I am a priest of the Diocese of Buea. I share in the priesthood of Christ, but I share in the ministry of my bishop. So the bishop is the authentic and the proper teacher of faith in the diocese. But since the bishop cannot be everywhere, I share in his ministry because he is the successor of the apostle. But among the apostles, there was a prince of the apostle, that was Peter. So therefore, Peter was in charge of the church. In fact, it is his sole duty to evangelize the church, but he cannot do that alone. So he extends that ministry to the apostles. The apostles in turn extend to what? To us now, the priest. So the bishop is the successor of the apostle. So let us go into the life of Pope Leo XIV, because that is our focus today. Of course, it's not too long that we had a new pope. The world has been waiting, everybody was waiting, and who got select for us this time around? Some people were projecting already Cardinal Sarah, some people were Cardinal from the, I like God so much, because when you people think that he used the other one. I remember that of Pope Francis. Pope Francis went there just like somebody he was not even aware that they were going to vote him. He just went there, loco, and he was just voted. Like this other man who went in there, this Francis also, when he went in there, he was not aware of it. He's not even up to a cardinal for 2 years. You can imagine. That's how God works. So let us look at the biography of Leo XIV.
Yes, Father Cletus. Worthy of notice, like you were talking about the see or the chair of St. Peter, we have that celebration every February 22nd to officially celebrate the official seat of the Pope or the successor of St. Peter. And we must note that Pope Leo the 14th was born in September 14, 1955 in Chicago to Louis Marius Prévost of French nationality and Italian descent. Then the mother was Mildred Martinez of Spanish descent. He had two brothers, Luis Martinez and John Joseph. We must note that he spent his early days, his childhood and adolescence with his family and studied first at the Major Seminary of the Augustinian Fathers and then at Villanova University in Pennsylvania, where in 1977 he earned a degree in mathematics and also studied philosophy. He later pursued his theological education in the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. Then from there, on September 1st, the same year, Prévost entered the novitiate of the Order of St. Augustine in St. Louis in the province of Our Lady of Good Counsel of Chicago and made his first profession on September 2nd, 1978. On August 29th, 1981, he made his solemn vows. The future pontiff received his theological education, as we have mentioned, at the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. At the age of 27, he was sent by his superiors to Rome to study canon law at the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, where in Rome he was ordained a priest on June 19, 1982 at the Augustinian College of St. Monica by Archbishop Jean Jadot. Later on, the Prévost obtained his licentiate in 1984, and the following year, while preparing his doctoral thesis, was sent to the Augustinian mission in Culucanas on the role of his doctoral thesis, we must know, was on the role of local prayer in the Order of St. Augustine, and was appointed vocations director and missions director of the Augustinian province of Mother of Good Counsel in Olympia Fields, USA. So I think, Father Cletus, that is a brief of the current Pope that we have, the 267th Pope, Pope Leonard or Leo the 14th, who was given the name Robert Francis, as we know today. So that is a rundown of his early days up till the point where he became a doctor in canon law, as we have seen, Father Cletus.
Yeah, that's what you mentioned. He had two siblings. Of course, we have Louis Martin and John Joseph. And his childhood, he resident and raised up in Dalton, Illinois, at the suburb bordering between Chicago and Southeast. His early religious life, of course, included, as you have mentioned, served as an altar boy at St. Mary, the Assumption Church. That's why he served as an altar boy. Known for his devout nature, his classmates always nicknamed him Holy when he was a child. So already Leo the 14, his classmates nicknamed him the Holy. Yes. As a child, he would play like a priest, using the family iron board to like an altar. And then the family will look at him and say that this is a priest. And of course, he became a priest and later on became a bishop. He was created a cardinal by Pope Francis, and of course, he succeeded Pope Francis. You see how God does his things. It was Benedict XVI who created Pope Francis as cardinal. He succeeded Benedict XVI. Then Francis came and created Francis as cardinal. Then Francis succeeded St. Peter. Even though all the bishops do not succeed their brothers, yes, the Holy Father, the Holy Father does not succeed the immediate predecessor. Everybody is the successor of St. Peter. And that is why nobody can ever have Peter II. Nobody can ever have that name. We are only St. Peter alone. That name, nobody can take it. Yes, nobody can take it. So we can take other names. And it's not by force one way to make you a Holy Father, you need to change your name. Yes, some people in the church used to have so many people didn't change their names. So therefore, Francis decided to take the name Leo the 14th. And going back to the history of the Leo the 13th, whom Francis took Leo the 14th after him. I think when you look at the advent of Industrial Revolution, where machine replaced human labor at that time, there was social injustice, social inequality. There was the dignity of human labor was in the drain, and there was human exploitation. And Pope Leo the 13th at that time, on the 15th of May 1891, wrote the first ever social encyclica of the church, Rerum Novarum. This document spells out the importance of human labor, the dignity of human labor, the dignity of human person, and it was against Marxism and all those isms, and promoted the dignity of human person. I think when Leo the 14th is coming up with that name, already we can see that in his pontificate he's going to promote social justice. Otherwise, of course, yesterday he refused $2,000 that will be given to him, that he should be given to the poor. he already picking some aspect of Pope Francis already, and so I think charity and yes, and he addressed the press in the early hours of the day, and he told them to be men of honor and dignity. Already we are going to see that the church has blessed us with a real and good and timely Pope. Of course, Mr. Cliff Hour, let us look at his other aspects of life. Let us look at his studies.
Yeah, of course, Father Aka. I think he had a mission in Peru in 1888, where he joined the mission in Trujillo, also in Peru, and then as director of the Joint Formation Project for Augustinian candidate for the vicariates of Culucanas, Iquitos, and Apurimac. Now, over the course of 11 years, he served as prayer of the community in 1988 to 1992.
Yes. Before that, let me just give you a brief summary of his early life in the secondary school. He attended St. Augustine Seminary High School in Peru, and he did undergraduate studies. He enrolled at the Villanova University and Augustinian Institute in Pennsylvania, and a Bachelor of Science
in mathematics in 1977. Yeah, in 1977.
Yes.
Then he entered now the religious vocation. He entered the novitiate of the Order of St. Augustine in St. Louis in 1977. Then professed first vows in 1978 and solemn vows in 1981. Of course, we now begin now with the theological studies before reaching now where you have that where you continue from there.
Okay.
He obtained a master degree in divinity from the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. Ordained as a priest on June 19, 1982. Pursued advanced studies in Rome at the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, Angelicum. Received a licentiate in canon law in 1984 and a doctorate in 1987. Yes. Now his missionary work and leadership role in the church now.
Yeah, of course, as I was saying, for the Aka, 1978, he joined the mission to Trujillo, and then he was also, that was in Peru, and then also as director of the Joint Formation Project for Augustinian candidate from the Vicariate of Culucanas, Iquitos, and Apurimac. And of course, over the course of his 11 years, he served as prior of the community. That was between 1988 to 1992, and then formation director 1988 to 1998, and instructor for professed members 1992 to 1998, and then in the Archdiocese of Trujillo as judicial vicar 1989 to 1998, and then professor of canon law, patristics, and moral theology at the major seminary San Carlos, San Marcelo. And then of course from there, at that time, he was also entrusted with the pastoral care of Our Lady, Mother of the Church, and then later established as the parish of St. Rita between 1988 to 1999, and then in a poor suburb of the city, and then he was the parish administrator of Our Lady of Montserrat from 1992 to 1999. Then in 1999 again, he was elected provincial prior of the Augustinian province of Mother of Good Counsel in Chicago, and then 2.5 years later, the ordinary general chapter of the Order of St. Augustine elected him as prior general, confirming him in 2007 for a second term. Then in October 2013, he returned to his Augustinian province in Chicago, serving as director of formation at the St. Augustine Convent, first chancellor and provincial vicar, roles he held until Pope Francis appointed him on November 3rd, 2014 as apostolic administrator of the Peruvian Diocese of Chiclayo, elevating him to the episcopal dignity at titular bishop of Sofa. He entered the diocese on the 7th of November in the presence of the apostolic nuncio James Patrick Green, who ordained him bishop just over a month later. On December 12th, the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the Cathedral of St. Mary. And of course, his episcopal motto for the Aka, which we have seen, is In Illo Uno Unum, words pronounced by St. Augustine in a sermon on Psalm 127, to explain that although we Christians are many, in the one Christ we are one. I'll take his motto again. Although we Christians are many, in the one Christ we are one. Like Bishop Bibi will have his own, sanctify them in the truth. So that is his motto. Although we Christians are many, in the one Christ we are one. I think it is with his motto that we look at him from this dimension, Father Aka. There are other things which I think you may want to run through before we take other aspects of him. I think so far that is his when he was in Peru, these were the assignments that he had to carry on between 1988 right up till 2014, when he was appointed apostolic administrator at the Peruvian diocese of Chiclayo, Father Aka.
Yeah, so kindness, could you play for us some of the images of Pope Leo XIV?
It was in the late afternoons of May 8, 2025 that the hopes of expectant faithful, both those gathered at St. Peter's Square and those following live through varied social media outlets, were fulfilled as white smoke billowed from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, signaling the election of the new Bishop of Rome, leader of over 1.4 billion Catholics worldwide. Faithful to ancient tradition, Catholics heard the words Habemus Papam.
Annuncio vobis Gaudium Magnum. Habemus Papam.
With excitement, faithful worldwide received the news of the election of His Eminence, Robert Cardinal Francis Prevost, as the 267th Supreme Pontiff. Cardinal Prevost, upon his election, adopted the papal name Leo XIV.
Eminentissimum, ac reverendissimum Dominum, Dominum Robertum Franciscum, Sancte Romane Ecclesiae, Cardinalem Prevost, qui sibi nomen imposuit Leonem XIV.
Being the first pope from the United States of America, the 69-year-old Chicago-born pontiff is an Augustinian who has missionary exploits in Peru accredited to his pastoral career. The new pope was appointed bishop in 2001. He later served as Secretary General of the Peruvian Bishops' Conference, and in 2023 he was made prefect of the Dicastery for Bishops in Rome, and in that same year raised to a cardinal by the late Pontiff Francis. Upon his election, Pope Leo XIV addressed tens of thousands of faithful from the papal balcony at St. Peter's Square, sharing his hopes and joys with them, while remaining eternally grateful to his predecessor, Pope Francis.
Yeah, you see, I remember the joy in the world. Everybody was like, wow, we have been looking for a pope. You know, these days are not easy for us. Sometimes I find myself calling Pope Francis. I used to Francis. So, but in the long run, we are going to adjust and start calling Leo
the 14th.
No, yeah, we don't call the 14 in the liturgy. You just say Pope Leo. Yeah. So the man elected as the new sovereign pontiff, or the vicar of Christ, or the servant of the servants of God. Those are titles. There are so many titles of the Holy Father. And we go back to his missionary work and service in Peru. He was assigned to the mission in Peru in 1985 right up to 1986. Later served in the diocese of Chiclayo in Peru. Became the Peruvian citizen during his missionary tenure. His leadership within the Augustinian order was as follows: elected director of vocations and missions for the Augustinian province of Mother of Good Counsel in the Olympia Fields, Illinois in 1987. Served as prior general of the order of St. Augustine from 2001 to 2013. Of course, episcopal appointments. He was appointed Bishop of Peru in 2015, of course, by Pope Francis. Yes, served as a bishop until 2023. Then he was now appointed by Pope Francis, created and appointed by Pope Francis as prefect of the Dicastery of Bishops and president of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America on January 30th, 2023. Imagine 2023 January 30th. Then 2025 now he was made the Holy Father. I remember from the picture seen during the synod in Rome, he was on the same table with the Archbishop Andrew Nkea of Bamenda, and the man was just a very simple man. And we have seen most of his pictures in Congo, where he served in Congo. He visited Congo so many times. And of course, people were showing pictures that he came to Cameroon. He had not been to Cameroon before. Those pictures were all lies. We fact-checked them, and he has never come to Cameroon. So those who are prowling around over the social media and said that the Holy Father has been in Cameroon, he hasn't been in Cameroon before. So therefore, those were pictures in Congo, and the last one said that the show was in Kenya. The one that they have said that is Cameroon is Kenya. So let's continue with his life, Mr. Cliff Hour.
Yes, Father Aka, like you rightly mentioned out there, he was made prefect of the dicastery for bishops on January 30th, 2003, like you rightly mentioned. And then of course he was created cardinal in 2023, created by Pope Francis, as you mentioned. And then as head of the dicastery, he participated in the Pope's most recent apostolic journeys in both the first and second sessions of the 16 ordinary general assemblies of the Synod of Bishops on synodality that was held in Rome from October 4th to October 29, 2023, and from October 2nd to October 27, 2024 respectively. And of course, on October 4th, 2023, Pope Francis appointed him as a member of the dicasteries for evangelization. You see the first section of evangelization and the new particular churches for the doctrine of the faith, for the Eastern churches, for the clergy, for institute of consecrated life and societies of apostolic life, for culture and education, for legislative texts, and of the Pontifical Commission for the Vatican City State. Finally, on February 6th, this Argentinian Pope was promoted him to the Order of Bishops, granting him the title of the Sub-Obicanian Church of Albano. 3 days later, on February 9, he celebrated the Mass presided over by Pope Francis, late Pope Francis, in St. Peter's Square for the Jubilee of the Armed Forces, the second major event of the Holy Year of Hope. During the most recent hospitalization of his predecessor at the Gemelli Hospital, Prevost presided over the Rosary for Pope Francis' health in St. Peter's Square on March 3rd. And from there now, we begin to see where he fits in, or why he went in for the elections that the church needed a new pope. I think from there, Father, you have something to say. Then I'll come in again when you permit to see where to throw more. I think there are some interesting facts, some key issues also took place in that election where they were voting the new pope. I think there were some discussions that we need to see.
Yeah, of course, his election as pope happened on the 20s, as a 267 pope, happened on the 8th of May 2025, when he succeeded, of course, St. Peter and not Pope Francis. And he chose the Papa name Leo XIV, becoming the first American-born pope and the first Augustinian to ascend the papacy. And
That's
of
true.
course, yes, his inaugural messages delivered his first words as Pope: "Peace be with you."
That's true.
Yes,
Correct.
peace be with you.
Correct.
Yes, and we're talking about his cultural heritage, revelation of his maternal grandparents rooted in the Oran, and create a community of SPAC celebrates, earn him the affectionate nickname, the 7-word Pope. Of course, talking about his languages, the languages that he can speak, and personal trait, His language is fluent in English. The next day he celebrated Mass and he
Yes,
preached in English,
English.
Spanish, and Italiano. He proficient in several other languages, totally 7. He speaks 7 languages. So I think he's ripe enough to be a pope as he is. And his personal characteristics is that he's known for his humility,
Yeah.
approachability, and a commitment to social justice. I mentioned about social justice. Going back to Leo,
Leo.
is all about social justice. Emphasizes unity and dialogue within the church and with other faiths. That is ecumenism and interreligious dialogue. Yeah. I think you come in from that part.
Yes,
Mr. Clifford.
yes, for that, I think some insights pertaining to the things that happened at the Sistine Chapel. We know that it all started on the 7th of May 2025, and it is recorded that after a long and solemn procession into the Sistine Chapel, the cardinals gathered at their assigned seats and took their vows. Just before 6 p.m., the doors closed for the beginnings of the conclave. Now, the meditation at the start remarks on the gravity of the task at hand. Ran about an hour, so long that Cardinal Parolin, who was running the conclave, asked them if they wanted to call a night and delay the first vote until the next morning. But then, as the voting got around 7:30, the delay with no explanation to the outside world caused stir amongst the waiting crowd.
Yeah.
It seems perhaps the cardinal had already been picked. A pope was being dressed to come out of the balcony. Instead, the first vote that night amounted to Cardinal Omela of Spain. A bit of preliminary poll. The first vote that night, Cardinal Omela of Spain called it a bit of preliminary poll. In the first vote, there were several candidates who won significant votes according to Vatican insiders. And now we must know that they included Cardinal Parolin, Eldo, and the present Pope, Prevost. They were all amongst. That's when the cardinals returned to their guest houses and started discussing the strengths and weaknesses of these men, these cardinals who were top ranking the vote. Cardinal Muller of Germany, a prominent conservative critic of Pope Francis, whom the late Pope had fired from his position as the church's top doctrinal official, said he talked to the Latin Americans about Cardinal Prevost, and he was told that he was not divisive. The issue of ecumenism there, that he was not divisive. And then the climate now started showing that it is going increasingly positive for Cardinal Prevost. Now the election was coming to him. The next morning vote, the second and third of the conclave, made the picture clear, and in the fourth vote, the ballots overwhelmingly shifted to Cardinal Prevost. Cardinal Yu of South Korea particularly mentioned this. These are discussions that took place. Cardinal Tagle, who sat next to Cardinal Prevost, noticed him taking deep breaths as the vote amassed in his favor. This is what he said. I asked him, "Do you want a candy?" And he said, "Yes." This is what Cardinal Tagle recorded. And then later that afternoon, they voted again, then counted the ballot one by one. When Cardinal Prevost reached 89 votes, the 2/3 majority threshold needed to become a pope, the room erupted in standing ovation, and he remained seated. Cardinal David told us this: somebody had to pull him up. We are all teary-eyed as the counting continued and the votes for Cardinal Prevost near triple digits. Cardinal Parolin had to ask them to sit down so they could finish the counting. He obtained a very, very large majority of votes, Father Cletus.
Yeah.
And of course, after his election, cardinals enthusiastically congratulated the new pope. A short and contentious conclave was over, and Leo the 14th stepped through the crimson curtains on the balcony, like we saw there. That is it there. Thank you, Auntie Kindness. And then the America about rule. This is what it was said to him. If there's anything you want to change about the conclave rules, it is all in your hands now. This is Cardinal Tagle talking to the newly elected Pope. And of course, the election of Robert Francis Prevost on May 8, 2025, and whose name has been moved to Leo XIV, makes him the 267th Pope or leader of the Roman Catholic Church, and then marks two historic firsts. Leo is the first ever US born Pope to lead the church, and the first Pope from the Augustinian order, Father Aka. The rest you have already said it. Where he came out, the first thing, wished the waiting crowd, peace be with you, peace be with all of you. So this is what transpired, or a tip of the iceberg of what transpired. You can feed in yourself there and begin to see what happened. You can imagine not being a cardinal for up to 2 years, and then you go into the conclave, and then that you are succeeding, or you are becoming the successor of Saint Peter, the first Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. I think it's quite meritorious, was quite deserving, and he's going to lead the church in all ramifications as God wants him to lead the church, Father Aka.
Yeah, Kindness, could you give those images without the volume while we are explaining this? You see, there were 133 cardinals at that same conclave.
Yeah.
Then he had almost about 100 and something votes.
Something. He tripled.
Yes, he tripled. Imagine that, because what Cardinal is explaining to us today, he's saying that when they got to 89 votes, everybody stood up. The counting had not yet ended. When they came in, they kept counting. They kept counting. You see, when it is your thing, it's your thing. Yeah.
Because Cardinal Parolin said, they should sit
down. Let them continue.
Let them continue with the counting. Because he was already tripling the normal 89 vote that was supposed to make him the Pope.
Yeah.
So the counting continued. Then, of course, we can only attribute the fact that it is the Lord's doing, and that he was only the right Pope at this time. Remember that Cardinal Muller spoke about the Pope to the Americans. They said, no, he is not a divisive somebody. And then from the next votings, it is stated clearly that all the votes started pointing towards him, and of course, evidently, at the end of it, he became the new Pope with landslide victory, as we have rightly seen there, Father Aka.
Thank you. Thank you, Kindness. Thank you so much for that. Of course, I want us to look at this very particular phrase again. Cardinal Tagle, who sat next to Cardinal Prevost, noticed him taking a deep breath as votes amassed in his favor. Then the Cardinal Tagle asked him, do you want a candy? He immediately said yes. Immediately said yes. And Cardinal Tagle said, later in the afternoon, they voted again and then counted the ballots one by one. When Cardinal Prevost reached 89 votes, the 2/3 majority threshold needed to become a pope, the room erupted in a standing ovation. Everybody stood up and they were all clapping and shouting.
Yes, in confirmation. When the counting had not ended.
The counting had not ended. So the cardinal in charge had to tell them to sit down, let them continue with the counting. And then they said that way they start down, the counting tripled. That means I was just saying that maybe he took the 103 votes, because if he tripled 89 times 2, what can we have here? you see, it has never happened like this in the history of the Catholic Church. I went through the history, like nobody has ever had this type of vote. And it should be noted that this year the number of cardinals increased to 133. For the first ever time in the history of the church to have the number of cardinals 133 to enter the conclave to vote for the Holy Father. You can imagine that the Cardinal Francis Prevost had more than 120 votes out of 133 votes. Yeah. It's a wonderful thing, it's a powerful thing that God is showing us. I think that what I really love about this thing is that do you need a candy? He said yes.
Yes. And could not get up from his seat.
He could not. Everybody stood up.
They had to send someone.
Yes, to
pull
him up. Stand up, my friend.
We were all.
And Cardinal Davis said somebody had to pull him up.
Pull him up.
We all.
You can imagine the shock.
Teary eyes. Everybody was crying. You remember the day of when you greeted the people, you cried. Kind of show us the day the Holy Father was greeting the people. He cried.
Yes.
You saw tears.
Focus on his face. Let's see.
Focus on his face. Let us see. Tears came out of his eyes. This is what happened in the conclave. He cried in the conclave. I still cry when he came out. He was crying because of when they say Jesus went over Jerusalem. Yes, because he was seeing the trouble that will come after that. But the Holy Father here is weeping. Yes, look at him. Look at him there. Look at him. The man is really weeping. Look at him. See, he's weeping.
Blushing at the same time.
You know, because when he came out, he saw billions of persons waiting. It's something to cry. It's a privilege to share in the ministry of Peter. I know Pope Francis will just be smiling in heaven.
Yeah, that the will of God has been done.
Yes,
the will of God has been done. And for the ACA, I think we must learn the fact that you see that the last days of Pope Francis, Cardinal Prevost was very close to him, to his missions, like we have seen.
Yeah,
I think it all boils down to the. I was reading one book, Attitude is Everything. And then there is this caption, get us, never get, but give us, get. This was, in essence, talking about service. That people who receive are those who give. And in that book, we're talking about service, offering services. And you can see the effortlessness of Pope Leo in the days of the late Pope Francis. You saw him going from one mission to the other, and then at the time when the Pope became sick, he was also there. It is recorded that he was the one who led the rosary prayer to praying that Pope Francis should recover.
Yeah.
All of this, I think, nature was recording these activities, and then only making him, because he had worked close with Pope Francis, it was only right and just that he becomes the next pope, just to continue after the line. We have also shared some of those instances where he's already copying the lifestyle of Pope Francis, especially to bring unity in the church, and then the aspect of charity, and then looking at those who lies at the margins of the society where he had worked in such missions. So I think it is only right and just that somebody like this takes over from where Pope Francis stopped, and then to continue in that same spirit, that same manner, to continue to bring. And if you see even his motto, we Christians, even though we are many, in the one Christ we are one. I think, like you rightly said, the spirit of ecumenism, it's a spirit of interreligious dialogue. These are some of the things that we are expecting to see in the reign of Pope Leo, who has just taken in as the 267th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, or Western Church, Father Aka.
Yeah, of course, the 69 years old sovereign pontiff, of course, really said that he wanted his message of love, peace, to enter our family, our hearts, and of course on all the heart of all the people wherever they are. During his address, he spoke in Italian, Spanish, and of course Latin. It's rare. No pope has ever done like this. They always speak in Italiano. But he spoke in Italian, Spanish, and Latin. The next day, he made mass
with English.
So I think there's that dynamics that is bringing into the church, and of course, it's going to change the life of the church and bring it to a wonderful thing. So it is here that we come to the close of our program. Thank you very much, Cliff Hour. Thank you very much, all viewers of DMR TV. Thank you very much, Kindness, for making it possible for us to see this wonderful program of today. Of course, thank you, the station manager of DMR TV, Madam Joyce, and have a wonderful night. God bless you. We'll see you again next week on Tuesday.
Deus
substantialem vatri, per quem omnia facta sunt.
Qui propter nos homines, e propter nostram salutem, descendit ad celi,
Et incarnatus est de Spiritu Sancto ex Maria Virgine, et homo factus est.
crucifixus etiam pro nobis, sub Pontio Pilato, passus et sepultus
Et resurrexit tertia die, secundum scripturas.
et ascendit in caelum, sedet ad dexteram Patris,
Et iterum venturus est cum gloria, judicare vivos et mortuos, coius regni no erit fine.